The era of 1,000 years of peace had ended. The Crexian Empire had formally declared war on humanity, and, absurdly, the humans laughed. "They are mocking us, Supreme Commander," Zorthak reported to his officers, his voice low with simmering outrage. Lieutenant Vex's violet skin deepened to a bruised shade of purple. "It's true," she admitted, her voice almost apologetic. "They're actually laughing." All four of Zorthak's eyes blinked in rapid, agitated bursts, a Crexian sign of barely contained fury. His upper limbs clamped so hard onto the arms of his command throne that the alloy plating began to bend under the pressure. "Replay the message," he ordered, his tone like a blade drawn from its sheath. The main view screen hummed to life. A human woman appeared, auburn hair cropped close to her head, eyes as blue as the seas of her homeworld. This was Admiral Tessa Monroe, Supreme Commander of Earth's Defense Forces. Her lips curved into a faint smirk. "Let me get this straight," she said, with the kind of casual confidence that made Zorthak's secondary heart skip a beat. "You, the mighty Crexian Empire, are declaring war on humanity because we won't hand over exclusive mining rights to an uninhabited rock at the edge of our solar system? The audacity! The blatant lack of fear." In the original transmission, Zorthak had made their position clear. "We are the Crexian Empire. We have conquered 12 galaxies. Our warships blot out stars. Our armies number in the trillions. The treaty your ancestors signed a millennium ago is over, and we choose not to renew it. Surrender or be annihilated." And how had she responded? She had laughed. "You do realize," Admiral Monroe continued, her tone razor-sharp beneath the humor, "that we've been keeping an eye on you for the last 1,000 years? We've monitored your communications, dissected your technology, mapped your tactic. That treaty you think was for our safety?" Her smirk widened. "It was for yours." The bridge of the Crexian flagship went utterly silent. 50 of the Empire's highest-ranking officers turned toward their Supreme Commander, waiting for his verdict. "She's bluffing," whispered Science Officer Krell. "They have to be." "Are they?" Zorthak demanded, swiveling to face his intelligence chief, Director Lormar. "Explain this. Why do they show no fear? No plea for mercy? They are a single-species civilization bound to one star system." Lormar stepped forward, his chitinous armor plates clicking faintly. "Supreme Commander, our information on humanity is incomplete. The treaty barred us from observing them directly. When first contact occurred, they had only just left their homeworld's atmosphere. Their weapons relied on crude chemical propellant. Their medicine involved cutting flesh and sewing it back together. And now," Zorthak pressed. "We don't know," Lormar admitted. "The treaty kept us 5 light-years away from their system. Over the centuries, we've detected occasional unusual energy spikes, but nothing conclusive. It's possible they've advanced." "In only 1,000 years?" Zorthak scoffed. "Impossible. It took our people 15,000 to master interstellar travel." Fleet Admiral Dex spoke up, tentacles shifting uneasily. "With respect, Supreme Commander, perhaps we should send a reconnaissance vessel to gauge their capabilities before committing the entire fleet." "Cowardice!" Zorthak barked, his voice rumbling through the deck plating. "From an admiral of my own fleet, no less. We are Crexian, we do not scout. We do not hesitate. We conquer." Dex's tentacles tightened in distress. "But if there's any truth to what she claimed—" "Enough!" Zorthak roared, rising to his full 12-foot height. "Ready the Armada. Every ship, every soldier. We will blacken their skies, boil their seas, and remind these humans what it is to stand against the might of the Crexian Empire." The bridge erupted in motion, officers barking orders and transmitting fleet-wide commands. But Zorthak's attention drifted back to the frozen image of Admiral Monroe, her infuriating smirk still fixed in place. Then her recorded voice returned one last time. "Oh, and when you come," she said with almost playful malice, "bring something interesting. We've been stuck in this solar system for 1,000 years, with nothing to do but prepare for your return. We're really looking forward to seeing what you've got." The screen went dark. Zorthak stood still for several long moments, an odd and unwelcome sensation curling in the pit of his being. Was it doubt? He shook it off with a growl. "Director Lormar," he snapped, "what is their military strength?" Lormar checked his datapad. "Based on intelligence from a millennium ago, roughly 50 million soldiers and 10,000 spacecraft of limited capability. And ours? 10 trillion warriors across the Empire, with 500 million currently stationed aboard capital vessels. The Armada numbers 100,000 warships, each capable of rendering a planet into molten rock." Some of the tension in Zorthak's shoulders eased. The numbers speak for themselves. Even if they've improved, they cannot match us. Lormar hesitated. "There is one other note from our first assessment of humans." "Speak." "They have a peculiar psychological trait. Threats tend to provoke aggression rather than submission. They also treat mortality differently from most species. They know they will die, yet behave as if they cannot. This makes their actions unpredictable." Zorthak waved one heavy appendage dismissively. "Such quirks won't stop a plasma barrage. Plot a course for the Sol system." The Crexian Armada surged forward at full burn, a glittering tide of war stretching across light years. Yet in the heart of its command ship, Supreme Commander Zorthak could not silence the echo of that human laugh. It wasn't the laughter of someone bluffing, nor the hollow chuckle of false bravado. It had been the knowing, confident amusement of someone holding a card he had not seen. And for the first time in his 3 centuries of life, Zorthak felt a thin ribbon of cold creep along his spine. The journey to the human home system took 3 standard weeks, 3 long weeks of preparation drills, battle simulations, and war speeches delivered to bolster his officers' morale. 3 weeks of rehearsing a swift, glorious conquest in his mind. 3 weeks of trying, unsuccessfully, to erase the memory of Admiral Monroe's smile. Approaching the Sol system boundary, Supreme Commander, Navigator Zell announced. "Crossing Pluto's orbit in 5 minutes." Zorthak rose slightly in his throne, his polished ceremonial armor catching the bridge lights like molten silver. He had dressed to greet victory. "Any sign they've noticed our arrival?" "Negative, Commander," replied Communications Officer Trill after scanning her readouts. "No transmissions. No visible defenses. The system appears entirely unprepared." "Overconfidence," Zorthak muttered, "is the surest herald of defeat." The fleet streamed across the system's edge. The bridge crew expected the moment, the alarms, the sudden contact reports, the scramble of human defenders racing to meet them. But nothing came. "Maintain approach," Zorthak ordered. "Battle formation holds." The Crexian formation slipped deeper into the system, passing the ghostly blues of Neptune and the icy crown of Uranus without a challenge. Even Saturn's broad rings came into view without incident. Zorthak's tension began to ease. Perhaps humanity truly was bluffing. Perhaps a millennium of isolation had driven them to arrogance or madness. Then Science Officer Krell's voice shattered the illusion. "Supreme Commander, I'm reading irregularities from Saturn's rings." "What kind of irregularities?" Zorthak asked sharply. "They are moving, sir," Krell replied, disbelief seeping into her tone. "Sections are shifting against expected orbital paths." Before Zorthak could demand clarification, the tactical displays flared with proximity alert. Saturn's rings were breaking apart. But not in chaos, in deliberate, coordinated patterns. "It's not ice," Krell whispered. "No," Zorthak said grimly, watching the impossible unfold. "They are ships. Billions of small craft, so perfectly disguised among the planet's frozen debris, revealed themselves, detaching from their camouflage and assembling into a glittering swarm." "Incoming transmission," Trill reported, her voice taut. The screen lit once more with Admiral Monroe's face. She stood on the bridge of a vessel unlike any in Crexian databases. Sleek lines, no visible seams, a geometry that hinted at both beauty and menace. "Welcome to Sol, Commander Zorthak," she said brightly. "I see you've brought, well, everyone. How considerate." Zorthak kept his voice steady. "Explain this illusion. Where did such numbers come from? An illusion?" Monroe raised a brow. "No, Commander. Preparation. As for where they came from, we built them. All 10 billion. Zorthak's appendages flexed in disbelief. "Impossible. No civilization can construct that many vessels." "Oh, right," Monroe said with mock sympathy. "You still build ships one at a time. Very charming. We automated that about 8 centuries ago. These days our orbital foundries produce a warship every 1.3 seconds. You can do the math." Zorthak turned to his weapons officer. "Status. All batteries armed and ready," came the response. "Target their swarm and open fire." Monroe's sigh was audible even over the comms. "That's really the first thing you want to try? All right, if you insist." The Crexian fleet unleashed its fury. 100,000 capital ships fired in perfect synchrony, turning the black between worlds into a blazing inferno of plasma and beam weaponry. Against any known foe, the barrage would have been annihilation. But the human fleet moved. They didn't merely dodge, they wove and spun with impossible grace. Entire formations shifted like schools of fish, threading through incoming fire as though the battle was a dance. Some vessels accelerated so fast they should have torn themselves, and any crew, apart. "They're unmanned," Krell realized aloud. "Correct," Monroe said, her tone maddeningly casual. "We call them the Swarm. Fully autonomous. They've been running war games against simulated Crexian tactics for about 900 years now. They're, well, pretty good at it." Zorthak's eyes scanned the tactical display. Not a single human vessel had been struck. Not one. "Our turn," Monroe said softly. The cheer had left her voice. From within the endless swarm, perhaps 1,000 of the human craft broke formation, accelerating toward the Crexian battle line. By comparison to the massive Crexian capital ships, they were specks, the size of planetary shuttles. "Raise defensive screens to maximum," Zorthak commanded. The tiny vessels didn't fire. They didn't need to. They passed through the energy shields as if they weren't there, slipped into direct contact with Crexian hulls, and phased straight through the metal. Seconds later, 20 Crexian warships disintegrated in perfect silence, breaking down into drifting clouds of molecules. On the human flagship, Monroe's expression was almost bored. "Phase shift technology," she explained, as though giving a lecture to a student. Monroe's voice was calm, almost conversational, as she explained, "Our phase shift systems let a vessel exist partially outside conventional matter. We cracked the code while untangling quantum mechanics centuries ago. Handy trick, hard to fight something that can pass straight through your shields." Zorthak found no reply forming on his tongue. This was more than advanced engineering, it was sorcery disguised as science. Knowledge so far beyond Crexian comprehension it might as well have been magic. Monroe clapped her hands lightly, as if to signal the end of her demonstration. "So, here's my counterproposal. You take your ships, turn them around, renew the treaty, this time for 10,000 years, and we'll consider this misunderstanding resolved." "And if we refuse?" Zorthak managed, his voice hoarse. For the first time since their encounter began, Admiral Monroe's expression hardened. "Then we finish the demonstration. And your empire will be shopping for a new supreme commander, and about 100,000 replacement warships. Retreat." In his 3 centuries of service, the word had never been part of Zorthak's vocabulary. The Crexian military doctrine did not even possess a precise term for it, the closest equivalent, strategic repositioning for future conquest, was so rarely spoken that many officers didn't recognize it. And yet here he stood, tasting the bitterness of the order before it even left his mouth. "All vessels, reverse course," he commanded, each syllable heavy with humiliation. Maintain defensive formation. No hostile actions. The officers around him exchanged stunned glances, but none dared object. Even the most bloodthirsty among them had seen 20 Crexian capital ships dissolve into dust in the space of seconds. No one wished to be the 21st. Human vessels holding position, reported Tactical Officer Jex. No pursuit. On the screen, Monroe inclined her head slightly. Wise decision, Commander. Your fleet is free to withdraw without incident. This isn't over, Zorthak growled. The Crexian Empire does not yield. Of course not, Monroe replied smoothly, a trace of her earlier smirk creeping back. You're simply strategically repositioning for future conquest. We understand. Zorthak's upper eyes narrowed. You speak our tongue? All 317 languages spoken across your empire, Monroe answered, including the 22 restricted military dialects. Language was one of the first subjects we mastered during our research. You've been spying on us, Zorthak accused, his voice sharp. Monroe laughed, that same infuriating, confident laugh that had haunted him since their first meeting. The treaty forbade us from entering within 5 light-years of your borders. It didn't forbid us from watching from farther away. Observation from thousands of light-years? Nonsense. Quantum entanglement comms, she said, the tone one might use to explain arithmetic to a child. Instantaneous data transfer, no matter the distance. We've had dust-sized probes seeded across your territory for roughly 9.5 centuries. Don't bother looking, you won't find them. Rage surged in Zorthak's chest, threatening to burn away reason. You dare ridicule the greatest empire in the known universe? Greatest. Monroe tilted her head slightly, as though weighing the word. If you're measuring by sheer territory, yes, you've outpaced us. We've stayed in one star system. But if you measure by technology, efficiency, science, or medicine, she let the pause hang. You're trailing us by centuries. Lies. Zorthak thundered. No species advances that quickly. Most don't, Monroe agreed. But most don't live the way we do. Short lives, relentless curiosity, and a deep, gnawing awareness that extinction could arrive at any moment. Fear of the end can be an incredible motivator. As the Crexian fleet continued its reluctant retreat, Director Lormar stepped to Zorthak's side, lowering his voice so only the Supreme Commander could hear. I've been studying the energy signatures of their vessels. Supreme Commander, these readings do not match any known power system. Even with automation, producing billions of ships would require resources beyond what a single star system should supply. Your point. Zorthak snapped, still simmering. I believe they've achieved true matter conversion, Lormar said gravely. Creating vessels directly from energy, perhaps even from fluctuations in the quantum vacuum. If that's correct, their potential output is infinite. They could build entire fleets in days. Or hours. The thought landed in Zorthak's mind like a stone dropped into deep water, sinking and pulling him down with it. If humanity could conjure matter at will, then there was no ceiling to their military power, no attrition, no scarcity, no end. He forced his voice into a veneer of politeness. Admiral Monroe, one question before we depart. Why did your ancestors agree to the treaty 1,000 years ago? If it wasn't to protect yourselves, why grant us that time? Monroe's expression softened in a way that made Zorthak uneasy. Honestly? Pity. Pity. He spat the word as though it were poison. Our first contact analysts concluded that your species had reached a kind of evolutionary cul-de-sac, biologically and culturally. You'd plateaued. Without outside intervention, you'd remain stagnant for millennia. The hope was that giving you 1,000 years of peace would let you grow, catch up, maybe meet us as equals when the time came. She gave a small shrug. It appears we overestimated you. The bridge was silent, save for the muted hum of the flagship's engines as it carried the most powerful fleet in Crexian history away. This time, the silence on the Crexian flagship's bridge wasn't shock, it was humiliation. Every officer, every soldier felt the weight of Monroe's words pressing on them like gravity. And beneath the sting, there was an unspoken acknowledgement: she was right. The Empire hadn't produced a truly original breakthrough in living memory. Their innovation had always meant seizing the ideas of others. "We will return," Zorthak vowed, and his voice wavered despite his effort to keep it steady. "We will study. We will grow. And when we come back, it will be different." Monroe's gaze softened for the first time. "I hope you do, Commander. The galaxy would benefit from a Crexian people who've outgrown the need to conquer. There are forces out there that will demand cooperation, not competition." Zorthak's upper eyes narrowed. "Forces? We've roamed 12 galaxies and met no species greater than ourselves." "That's because they don't want to be found," Monroe replied cryptically. "Not yet. But they're watching, just as we've been watching you." Before Zorthak could demand more, the human fleet began to shift. Billions of ships drifted from their stationary guard to weave into an intricate pattern, the movement rippling like a living organism. "What are they doing?" Krell asked, her hands darting over her console. Lormar began to answer, then froze, mandibles twitching in disbelief. "They're generating a gravity field. A massive one." On the main display, the human vessels rotated in flawless synchronicity, their combined pull bending the fabric of space. The distortion deepened until the very stars behind it seemed to smear and twist. Monroe's voice came again, calm and matter-of-fact. "A small demonstration. Something for you to remember us by." The vortex collapsed inward, its center flaring with a blinding white light. The bridge's filters dimmed automatically, sparing Crexian eyes from the intensity. When the glare faded, the space where billions of human warships had hovered was now occupied by a perfect replica of Saturn, rings and all. A world forged in minutes. "They made a planet?" Navigator Zell whispered, her tone straddling awe and disbelief. Monroe's image flickered back onto the screen. "We'll be in touch, Commander Zorthak, when you're ready for a real discussion about the future. Until then, use your time wisely." The transmission cut. The human fleet remained silent as the Crexian Armada turned away, its retreat lit by the pale glow of the artificial Saturn, shrinking in the distance. For the first time in his life, Zorthak understood what it was to be primitive. The return voyage to Crexia Prime took 3 long months. 3 months of wordless shame. 3 months in which the Supreme Commander locked himself inside his quarters, combing through every shred of data they had on humanity, searching for some vulnerability, some flaw in their godlike capabilities. He found nothing. When at last the battered Armada reached the homeworld, Zorthak steeled himself for the end of his career, perhaps even his life. The Empire did not tolerate failure, least of all from its highest military officer. Instead, the High Council summoned him for a closed audience. No public trial, no spectacle. Just the council chamber's ring of shadowed figures, led by Arch-Councillor Vexmer, the oldest living Crexian. "Tell us everything," Vexmer commanded. "Leave nothing unsaid." Zorthak obeyed, recounting the full humiliation. The laughter, the hidden fleet, the phase shift technology, the matter creation, the forging of a planet before his eyes. With each revelation, the Council's expressions hardened. "And they spoke of threats greater than themselves?" Councillor Drez asked when the tale ended. "Yes," Zorthak confirmed. "They offered no details." "A ruse, perhaps," suggested Councillor Krell. "A way to scatter our focus." Zorthak shook his head slowly. No. She had no reason to deceive. They had already proven their superiority beyond doubt. Arch-Councillor Vexmer's voice cut through the murmurs. "Then what course would you set for the Empire, Supreme Commander? What action serves us best in such a situation?" 3 months of contemplation had shaped Zorthak's answer. He knew that what he said next would decide not only his fate, but perhaps the survival of his species. "I propose we learn." Vexmer's eyes narrowed. Learn? Explain. The humans were correct about us, Zorthak admitted, the words scraping like glass against his pride. We have stagnated. For 10,000 years, we have expanded without invention, stolen rather than created. It has made us brittle beneath our armor. The chamber erupted in protests, voices thick with outrage. Vexmer silenced them with a single raised claw. I propose we restructure the Empire's priorities, Zorthak continued. Reduce our focus on conquest. Direct our resources to scientific discovery, innovation, and technological growth. Close the gap between us and humanity. Councillor Traz's voice was a low snarl. You would abandon conquest, the very core of our identity? Not abandon, Zorthak replied. Postpone. For 100 years. 2 if necessary. Enough to transform ourselves into something more than a predator that feeds on the achievements of others. And if the humans decide to leave their cradle during that time? Vexmer asked. If they choose to expand as we once did? They won't, Zorthak said without hesitation. If expansion were their goal, they would have done it 1,000 years ago. Whatever drives them, it's not conquest. It's something else, something we don't yet understand. The council chamber fell into contemplative silence. Dozens of eyes fixed on him, weighing his certainty. Finally, Arch-Councillor Vexmer spoke, voice measured. There is wisdom in your words, Supreme Commander. Painful wisdom, but wisdom nonetheless. The elder's gaze sharpened. However, such a shift in our way of life will meet fierce opposition. Many will brand it cowardice. Let them, Zorthak replied, his tone steady. I have seen the alternative, a war we cannot win. Perhaps even extinction. I will endure the insult of being called a coward if it spares our species from annihilation. Vexmer's nod was slow, deliberate. Very well. We will take a vote. But first, there is another matter. He motioned to a guard, who activated a wall panel. Bring in our guest. The great chamber doors slid open, and a figure stepped inside. Not Monroe, but a human male, tall, lean, with deep brown skin and closely cropped hair. His attire was plain. Earthen colors, no insignia, no armor. This is Dr. Jackson Webb, Vexmer announced. He arrived yesterday. Alone. In a vessel no larger than a personal shuttle. Zorthak's eyes narrowed. How did you breach our defenses? Your defenses are impressive, Webb said easily, as if commenting on the weather. The autonomous sentries in the Cygnus approach, a clever touch. He stepped forward, extending one hand. Supreme Commander Zorthak, I presume? After a moment's hesitation, Zorthak extended an appendage. The human clasped it briefly, then released it. Admiral Monroe sends her regards. Zorthak's voice dropped to a low growl. Why are you here, human? To offer help, Webb replied simply. And to deliver this. From his pocket, he withdrew a small, glowing object, no larger than a Crexian data crystal, pulsing with soft blue light. Zorthak turned it over in his grasp. What is it? The complete scientific and technological record of humanity, Webb said. Every breakthrough, every invention, every theoretical model, from the wheel to phase shift technology. All except weapons. Those you'll have to develop yourselves if you must. The Supreme Commander stared at the device, struggling to comprehend the gesture. Why would you give us this? Webb smiled, and the expression stirred an uncanny echo of Monroe's, not quite a smirk, but carrying the same unshakable confidence. Because growth needs competition. For 1,000 years we've had none. We've advanced quickly, yes, but without pressure from others, without new perspectives, we've grown intellectually inbred. Stale. You could change that. You want us as rivals? Zorthak asked, skeptical. We want you as partners, Webb corrected. Colleagues in building a galactic civilization. The threats Monroe mentioned? They're real. And they're bigger than either of us. Vexmer leaned forward. What threats exactly? Webb's smile faded. Between galaxies, there are regions where light bends in ways it shouldn't. Places where the laws of physics shift. We've been studying them for centuries. Something moves out there, ancient, patient, and powerful enough to view both our species as little more than microbes in a petri dish. Counselor Drez scoffed. And you think the Crexian Empire would help humanity after you humiliated our fleet? I think you'd help yourselves, Webb replied evenly. Survival is a language we both speak fluently. And with time, and this, he nodded to the crystal in Zorthak's grip, you might become the allies we'll need. Zorthak glanced at the device again. It was nothing in size, yet it could upend everything. Entire industries, social orders, military doctrines, all would be reshaped. But it could also be the lifeline that pulled them out of stagnation. We accept your gift, Zorthak said at last, his voice firm. And the challenge that comes with it. Webb inclined his head. Excellent. Then I'm authorized to propose a new treaty. Not one of isolation, but of limited cooperation. Scientific exchange. Cultural dialogue. Joint preparation for what's coming. And military matters? Zorthak asked carefully. That, Webb said, his tone cooling, will depend entirely on how quickly you turn from offense to defense. Trust will be earned, not given. The implication was unmistakable. The humans were offering a path forward, but not unconditional friendship. As the council began debating the unprecedented proposal, Zorthak studied the human. His earlier resentment had dimmed, replaced by something more curious. How had they advanced so far so fast? Why had they chosen exploration over domination? And, most baffling, why did they laugh when threatened? Even now, as Webb caught his gaze, there was that same glint of amusement. That same quiet confidence. Perhaps, Zorthak thought, that would be the first puzzle to solve. The strange psychology of a species that answered declarations of war with mirth. For the first time since retreating from Sol, he felt something stirring. Not anger, not humiliation, but the restless energy of a question begging for an answer. Curiosity. And as Webb outlined plans for joint research initiatives, Zorthak found himself, against all logic, anticipating the future. A future in which the Crexian Empire might become more than conquerors. A future where they could stand alongside humanity. A future where, when the true enemy came, they would be ready.